So arthropods, as I mentioned before, can be broken down first by their mouth parts. So they either have mandibles or they have chelicera, and this creates a subphylum. And we're going to talk about the chelicera first. And a chelicera, it's something that's hard to comprehend, I think, for us because we have a normal jaw and mouth type scenario. When we talked about the segments of the body, all of the segments of an arthropod's body used to have legs. But on some of them, those legs began to form different kinds of organs. And in some cases, they became things like fangs, or they became scissor-like organs that were next to the mouth. So instead of having opposing mandibles that sort of chew up their food, they have what amounts to a pair of feet that turned into scissors and chop their food up and shove it into a mouth hole that's behind where the chelicera are. And it's a really interesting way of feeding. The famous example of chelicera are the fangs that you see on a spider. So they don't chop things up, but they use the fang to inject venom and dissolve parts of what they want to eat. And they kind of take the fangs and they crunch up what they want to eat, and they slurp up all the juices as they do that. And so it creates this sort of crunched up ball that used to be a moth or a grasshopper, and it can make a hollow body as well. But it's just an interesting way for them to eat their food. And there are two main kinds of chelicera-bearing arthropods. The first group that we'll talk about is the older of the two. It's called merostomata, and this translated means thigh mouth. So we're just talking about how some of their legs turned into these chelicera, and that's what merostomata is referring to, the fact that part of their mouth used to be legs. The representatives of this group are the extinct sea scorpions and the extant horseshoe crabs. So sea scorpions, you can see one in the painting on the left there. These are animals that would probably horrify most human beings. This is an 8-foot-long arthropod that lived on the bottom of the ocean. So imagine you were down in Florida and you were just like walking around off the coast in the ocean. You could step on this and it has these huge chelicera on the front of it that it could pinch you with. Luckily, these all died out a long time ago and we don't have to deal with that. But we do still have the horseshoe crabs, which you see one on the right. If I was there in the room with you, I'd want to know how many of you have pet a horseshoe crab before. It's a pretty interesting experience to touch what amounts to a living fossil. But all of these merostomates have book gills that they breathe through. They have 6 pairs of appendages on the underside of their head, and they have a pair of compound eyes. You can see the big eyes on the front of the sea scorpion here, and then you can see the tiny ones on the horseshoe crab. They're on the sides there. So this horseshoe crab, this is the only one of this group that still exists. I think there's only about 10 or 20 species of horseshoe crab left in the world. But when you look at these images, one is it crawling up out of the ocean, and on the other one, you can see its legs, and in the front there, you can see its chelicera. They're the scissory-looking organs at the forefront of the head here, and behind it, behind those hairs, those bristles, that's the mouth that it puts the food down into. These have been around for about 450 million years. They have weird blood and a weird life cycle. They are important to us because they help us to create vaccines. Some of the stuff that's in their blood helps us to stabilize vaccines. It's an ancient organism, but it's one that's really fascinating. There's cool YouTube videos that you can watch about them, or books that you can read about them. I find them very interesting. So look some of the facts up about horseshoe crabs and try to pet one in the future if you get the opportunity. The other kind of chelicera-bearing arthropods are the arachnids, part of the group Arachnida, which translates to spider. It's kind of an unfortunate name because Arachnida does not include only spiders, but also includes scorpions, ticks, mites, and the spiders themselves. So it's a pretty diverse group of predators, of blood-feeding parasites, of plant-feeding mites. This has a lot of diversity in it, but they're all under Arachnida. The things that unite the arachnids are that they all have 2 body segments, a cephalothorax and an abdomen, and then they have no antenna on them, and they have 4 pairs of legs. When you look at something like a scorpion, like the one here on the right, you see those claws. Those are not legs, those are part of their mouth. And so they have 4 pairs of legs, 8 total legs, even when it looks like they have 10, like you see on the scorpions. Other than that, all other arthropods have mandibles. They have jaws that help to either crush food, or they've been modified in a variety of ways to help them to eat their food, suck it up liquid form or siphon it up in liquid form. And there are a ton of different creatures that have these mandibles. The first that we'll talk about are the myriapods. This means many legs, and it includes the centipedes and their cousins, the millipedes. Centipedes are one category. They have 1 pair of antennae, 1 pair of legs per body segment. They tend to be flat in shape, and they have venomous jaws at the front on their head, and they're predators. Their cousins, the millipedes, have 1 pair of antennae. They have 2 pairs of legs per body segment rather than the 1 that the centipede has. They're round in shape, usually darker in color, and they're decomposers. So they eat old leaf material. They don't bite us. They're not hazardous to us or anything. So this is a big group too, but those are the ways that we break them down into the centipedes and millipedes. Then we have the crustaceans, otherwise known as the hard-shelled ones or the delicious arthropods. Things like crayfish and lobsters and shrimp all fall into this category. They have 2 body segments like the arachnids. They have 2 pairs of antennae, though, on their head. They can have 5 to 7 pairs of legs, and then they have swimmerets or gills at the rear end of their abdomen. These are typically in the ocean, so they're usually a marine species. Some of them, like crayfish, can live in freshwater, but there are land-based crustaceans, and I guarantee that you've all met one of them before. It's called usually a roly-poly or a sow bug or a pill bug. This is essentially a land shrimp. It has all the traits of a crustacean, except it lives on land. So it's not a tiny millipede or some kind of insect. It's actually a crustacean. They do have a marine relative called a giant isopod that looks like this when people hold it. It's kind of a big version of the roly-poly. They have big glowing eyes on the front of their head and kind of big claws. So that's one in a human hand. This is one sitting next to a kitten on a Japanese game show, just to give you a sense of the size of these organisms. So again, a big group, lots of diversity, but they all have these common traits that we lined out here down on the bottom of the slide. And that leads us to the insects, or insecta, which translates into cut into sections. So this includes all of our insect friends, from roaches to beetles to cicadas to wasps. They all live in this category. They all have 3 body segments, 1 pair of antennae, and 3 pairs of legs. It's a very diverse group. If we look at these photographs on the next slide from Alex Wild, a famous insect photographer, you can see all different kinds of body plans, all different kinds of shapes, sizes, and colors, different roles in the environment, pollinators, predators, plant-feeding insects, decomposers. They do a ton of stuff in the environment. And insects, they're just really important and really fascinating. I know I'm biased as an entomologist, but really, we have to start appreciating them more because they are the most biodiverse group on Earth. We have more than 1 million species that we have identified thus far, with the possibility of upwards to 30 million more to find. That's a ton of diversity. If you look at this old pie chart, insects make up about 51% of life on Earth. They truly rule the planet. If aliens landed here and they asked who is in charge, you can't point to people, you have to point to the bugs. If you include the other arthropods, it gets a little bit bigger. But really the point of this chart is to say that bugs rule and plants drool, and we will always win as Team Bug. We will always win. So there's just a ton of them out there, and they play a really important role in our environments.